Hello and welcome to our Thursday morning conversation. My name is Rachel Jewett. I'm Via Satellite's managing editor, and I'm here with Rafal Modrzewski, CEO and co-founder of ICEYE. ICEYE is a synthetic aperture radar imagery provider, and the company has been named one of our 10 hottest companies for 2021. If you've been tuning into our TMCs lately, you can see that we've been interviewing all the CEOs of the 10 hottest companies. It's been some really great discussions. And so this week we are talking with ICEYE. So Rafal, congrats to ICEYE on making the 10 hottest companies.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be selected. We're extremely proud, and it's really great to also be here with you and speak to all of you guys.
Yeah, thanks. So how are you doing, and how have things been going for ICEYE in 2021?
I'm doing all right personally. Thank you for asking. All good so far. It's been quite a summer over here in Finland. This is where I spend most of my time. 2021 has been an exciting year, honestly. You know, it's been busy. Though I feel like every single year so far has been really busy for us. But this particular one, at least if nothing else, it's marked by the largest amount of launches. So the largest amount of satellites being deployed on the orbit. You know, you can see with ICEYE sort of this steady increase of the amount of satellites being launched per year. We started with one, obviously, then we had two, then we had four. You know, this year we are actually manufacturing over 12 satellites. So that's very, very exciting.
So how many are on orbit now, and how many do you plan to put up over the coming year?
Right, I need to make a quick math in my ear because you know, at the beginning of the year I was ready with an answer because it was 10 to be put up, and since then things have moved. We've just put up 4, and that would make probably that 6 are still about to be launched this year.
Okay.
But obviously, as everything within new space, it's subject to slight change related to the launch slippages. But we are aiming at another 6 on orbit. Okay. And so far, since the inception of the company, we've built and launched 14 altogether.
14, awesome. As you're manufacturing the satellites themselves, have you dealt with many supply chain issues over the past year? I know that's been a concern for a lot of companies.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I can say that we've dealt with some. I feel like maybe an item that's not generally known is that ICEYE not only manufactures the satellites in-house, but we actually manufacture most of the subsystems in-house. So most of the items that we purchase are actually quite low-level electronic components. So we do a lot of that subsystem manufacturing, which is why we would call ourselves very highly vertically integrated. We really go down in terms of the design. So we would, you know, like people often say that putting satellites together is like building out of Lego blocks. I guess we are also building the blocks themselves.
Okay.
But we did see, you know, it's an interesting, and it was extremely interesting for me to observe. You read about the supply chain, the chip shortage, and you just kind of wait for it to hit you. And you know, there you go, a month or 2 months later, you're actually starting to see the quotations on the lead times get longer and longer. And you're starting to, I mean, you know, the good things that we did is the first time you read about it, we started preparing for it. So we started stockpiling a certain amount of material. So we really haven't seen delays in terms of the satellites that we were about to launch, but it's definitely something that we had to mitigate.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first question I really have to ask about ICEYE for people who might not be familiar, but what is synthetic aperture radar, and how is SAR different from regular optical imagery?
Wow, it's a simple question, yet one that can be answered in a quite a long way. All right, let's start from the basics. So as you said, SAR or synthetic aperture radar. Very often it's also called an imaging radar, and it's an instrument. It's a scientific or imaging instrument. It's an instrument that works in a similar way to how a regular radar works like. So it sends a wave and then it records the bouncing wave back or the reflection of that wave from the target. But it executes on that particular activity over a longer both period of time as well as sort of distance. And through that distance, it really captures many images as it passes above a target. And then those images are then added up in order to synthesize the aperture or create what's part of the name, the synthetic aperture. Anyway, complexities aside, at the end of the day, what we are left with, it's an image with a much higher resolution than what the antenna would normally provide us, right? So if you want to kind of quickly look at the math, for instance, for our satellite, the antenna is about 3 meters long, but the resolution that the system is really able to provide equates to an antenna being probably about somewhere between maybe 7 to sometimes even 50 kilometers long. So you can really get a performance of a very, very large system through some interesting math tricks. And from the user perspective, ultimately what you get, it's an image that is somewhat surprisingly very similar to what an optical image would look like, right? So even though this is a radar imaging instrument and the math and the kind of the working principle is different, the image itself is not unlike, especially in the higher frequency spectrum, unlike what the optical image is. But I always, I will get into some of those technical details because I feel like it's important for people to understand that they look at different things. The image is similar, but with SAR, what they really see is the reflectivity of a material within a certain band. So we are using a 10 gigahertz band. So what you're really looking at, the pixel's brightness tells you how much of that energy that particular material reflected. And it's similar thing with the optical, but you really see colors and reflection of light. It's a very interesting dynamic. It's almost unbelievable that those images look similar. I guess from the most important sort of differentiators, at the end of the day, because the radar produces its own energy and it uses a specific frequency, which is a much lower frequency than optical frequency, you can take that image regardless of weather condition or time of day. So the optical or an optical camera or any other image sort of observing the world in the optical spectrum relies on the sun to provide the energy for observation. Radar really is its own sun, right? Radar creates its own energy in order to be able then to image the reflection. And as it creates that energy, it uses a specific band that is able to penetrate adverse weather conditions, right? So in short, we usually see that radar is an imaging instrument that can see through clouds and darkness. But I guess the answer can be also a bit longer.
Yeah, more in-depth.
Yes. An interesting thing that I will point out is that, I think people very often know already the fact that the radar sees through clouds and darkness.
Yeah.
But perhaps the consequence of that is not fully captured. And maybe we can spend a minute to kind of think about it a little bit, because what we've realized once we started building products on top of the data is that the space-based systems are really sort of an infrastructure for you, not unlike the cellular towers or the GPS satellites. Now, what changes between an imaging system that can see through clouds and darkness and one that can't is that the first one is highly reliable. So whenever an image needs to be delivered, whenever you are expecting data to come over and provide you with an information to a question that you have at hand, that data will be made available, right? Whereas an unreliable system, it's kind of going to be a question of probability. And now we as humanity in a way, or maybe consumers, we've gotten used to services that are very highly reliable and don't really think about services that potentially wouldn't be reliable. And I think the question that or the analogy that I often give to people is, let's imagine for a second that your Google Maps, the navigation device that takes you from A to B doesn't work during the night or bad weather conditions. That would not really be something that we want to be using or we want to rely on. And it's very interesting. It actually would present a significantly smaller value to us as users if it wouldn't work every single time we pull it out of our pocket. So it's an interesting thought experiment to kind of compare the highly reliable instruments versus the ones that sort of, are more probabilistic based.
So my understanding is that this type of imagery wasn't available commercially until recently. And ICEYE, you're one of the most advanced commercial SAR providers out there. So what is the story behind ICEYE, and how did you decide that this was the area that you wanted to pursue?
Another one of those questions that can be shorter or longer. I'll try to maybe give a shorter answer. Yeah, you're completely correct, right? The imagery wasn't at least as easily available commercially.
Yeah.
When ICEYE entered the market, there were some companies that provided commercial capabilities, but there weren't many, and they didn't have many satellites. And those satellites were very large and bulky. When I make this comparison, I would often compare this to the times when a computer took up an entire room, right?
Yeah.
Those were the times when a computer was really available to a selected few governments and maybe IBM or a bunch of really large companies that were able to afford both the room as well as the device in it, right? What ICEYE really is doing is like the PC revolution in the computer world, right? We are building smaller devices that are lower cost and provide services that ultimately can be used by consumers as well as businesses, smaller businesses that couldn't really afford the huge computers of the past, right?
Yeah.
And the reason for ICEYE's existence, and maybe the choice for this particular path, was really the engineering excitement, or perhaps the engineering adventure ahead. We were part of that same, let's say, wave of research and development going on into the CubeSats. We were also building our small satellite at the Aalto University. But when we've looked at all different possible sensors that one could put on a satellite, honestly, SAR is one of the more complex ones, if not the most complex one. That complexity is very much related to the fact that you have to generate your own power, which means that the instrument is very power hungry, and it comes with all different kind of consequences of that. So we thought, why not? Why not to go after the most challenging one?
Well, yeah, I mean, why not? But that can lead to a lot of challenges. And it sounds like you've been able to, overcome a lot of those with ICEYE, as obviously you all have a number of the satellites up in orbit and you've been in commercial service for a while.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess I'd be lying if I said that there weren't any challenges. There were. I don't know whether we would have had faced less had we chosen a different path, but I think that one was the exciting one. When in the early days we were really facing this problem, we have asked ourselves the question, what's the best way of facing those challenges? And we thought that it's very important for us as a company and as a team to remain agile and very iterative in our approach, right? So people don't know that this is not a story that we share very often, but there must have been about 10 different instruments or 10 different ICEYE X1s before the actual ICEYE X1 that was launched, because our way of building the satellites was very highly iterative. Every single time we would put together entirely, basically an entire full model, and then we would test it. And obviously something would have failed, which meant that both we had to rebuild it, but also we've just learned so much. And so relying on that quick iteration and learning curve really which is a result of that, was really the way we've approached it.
Yeah. And then why is the company headquartered in Finland, and what has your experience been in the Finnish space industry?
It's headquartered in Finland because that's where the founders have met. I'm originally Polish, honestly, and I've moved to Finland to study here at Aalto University radio science engineering. My co-founder Pekka, he's Finnish, so he's obviously been living here, and he was also studying at Aalto University the moment we've met. Now, that seemed like a natural place for us to locate the company. We couldn't have figured out the reason why both of us had to move immediately in order to start the company somewhere else. Finland is not an adverse environment from a business opportunity perspective. And it seemed to work. At the beginning, it was very, very early days. It was extremely small. There were only really two of us. And then what happened really is we've embarked on this journey and we've received at a certain point. The early days of ICEYE are really driven by a grant from an entity called, back then it was called Tekes. Nowadays it's called Business Finland. But that's like a Finnish national institute for the support of research and science.
Okay.
And that institute has, we've filed an application, of course, over there. We've submitted an application, but they have reviewed that application and granted us the first money that we really needed in order to execute on all the R&D that was necessary for us to build the satellite. And of course, we until this day, we feel like we own them a little bit. Finland is actually a very, very pleasant environment, especially this summer. This year's summer is extremely nice. We've never really had problem in terms of searching for talent or relocating talent over here.
Yeah.
I guess it's worth mentioning that we do have 5 other offices. So it's not only the Espoo office that exists, but probably about 60% of our personnel are here in Espoo, which is next to Helsinki. We've got currently among 300, a little bit over 300 people, 51 different nationalities. So as you can see, we did relocate a lot. And all of those people have found their home over here in Espoo or in Helsinki. So far, our experience has been excellent, honestly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know that you've had some expansion efforts in the past few months, opening manufacturing facilities in the US and some efforts to expand into Japan. So what's kind of been what's been your goal with that global growth, and how has that been going?
Our goal, I guess, is to always be as close to our users as we can.
Okay.
If you look at both the United States and Japan and Finland, actually, you see that both of those regions are virtually as far as they can be in terms of time difference, which naturally presents certain challenges for us to manage the communication with the customers, right? But both the time difference also translates itself into traveling distance, right? Yeah. So whenever you want to have a meeting with someone in the United States, for me to go to San Francisco, that's like 12 hours, or to Tokyo, that's probably like 8 to 9. It's the same for our customers, right? And obviously, this is the type of services that we are providing. They often require a lot of support. Customers are dealing with very high-end technology, which sometimes they need help understanding, or they need help with applications of that technology.
Yeah.
We have always been driven by supporting their needs or answering their needs as well and as thoroughly as we can, which is why when then the need really appears, we try to answer it and place all the necessary resources that they see required virtually, as step away from their house. We want to be their neighbors, right?
Yeah.
Because honestly, we don't think of them as clients or customers. At the end of the day, this market is so nascent that we think of all the users of our system as partners. Okay. They bring the added value to the data that we can provide. We learn from them as much as they learn from us, and I believe that jointly we can really really unlock the full potential of Earth observation.
Yeah. With this being a more nascent data source, you kind of have to explain it to the customers and why it will be valuable to them. So kind of what has that journey been like with customer acquisition and bringing people on board who may have never used this type of data before?
It's got its challenges, but it's also extremely rewarding. I think it's a similar journey to any kind of novel technology that's being introduced to the market. At first, there is a certain set of reservations. Then there is a need for education and understanding. Then there's obviously change management, because often the type of services that we are providing are replacing sometimes very manual processes that existed in place before in order to manage a particular issue. And at the end of the day, there's a ton of satisfaction, right? So the journey, even though quite maybe it's not tiring, but there is a certain amount of effort that's needed in order to accomplish that journey. once it's done, the customers are extremely pleased with the performance and the outcome of the systems, and we see that, and obviously that makes us happy, right? Because we have spent so much time and effort building those systems and now managing those systems that and I full-heartedly believe that this technology can be transformational for users, whether business users, governmental users, or even consumers.
Yeah.
And whenever we see that take place, and we see the excitement that the users have once they realize how differentiated the solution that they have now is, it's amazing, and it's just very pleasing, right?
Yeah. Could you give an example of that, of like a use case that you've been really excited about?
I think the one that has sort of resonated across our office the most was with one of the users that was struggling with deforestation management.
Okay.
And it was a very large area of forest, one of the largest forests globally. And obviously that's a use case that was very important to us, both because the problem was very challenging and large, even just area-wise. But also it's a problem that's really important to the younger generation, which let's say I will allow myself to still represent. I think it's a problem. As you may know, ICEYE has started with ice monitoring as its first use case that we were trying to tackle. This is really what has the driver behind the name. ICEYE is really a combination of word ice and I, and then the ICEYE's first use case and the intention really behind the company was to monitor the Arctic ice, right? So the climate change, climate control, and the consequences of that have always been really close to our mission and vision. And so anytime we've got a customer that's trying to do something around something, kind of ESG conscious, we are very happy to be able to support them. And so we've worked actually with that customer for quite some time, because we had to develop additional set of capabilities that would not only provide them the raw data, but also would perform the deforestation analysis over the large area, right? Because you can have the data, but then the question is, do you have the skill and the capacity to analyze all that information and figure out what's going on? Because sometimes the changes that you're looking for are very, very small, and the amount of people that you have available is just not as large, right? So imagine trying to find a vessel in the entirety of Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Right? If that vessel is small, ultimately someone's got to look through all those images,
right.
And the images are huge, right? So the question is, can you do it reliably in an automated manner? And so we've developed actually a whole new set of algorithms along with the user. The user was helping us with ground truth data. It was a true partnership, because they've told us what they know about the forest. They've told us what they know about the patterns of deforestation. We have applied all the knowledge of the spacecraft that we've got. We have applied we've actually developed some new imaging modes just for this particular use case. And at the end of the day, once we performed the tests, we were actually both amazed with the accuracy. So we were able to measure very, very small changes in the forest area over extremely large areas of forest with virtually no false alarms, which ultimately is one of the driving conditions for this to be a success. Because if you have to cross a jungle in order to get to a potentially deforested area, and that's a false alarm, you just wasted a lot of resources. So our key driving factor was not to make mistakes, and we've succeeded. And so now this service is used on daily basis, and it's capturing on regular basis the areas that are either being cut down or have suffered from wind damage or fire damage. And it's great. It's great to see this operational.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know that monitoring the effects of climate change is a huge area for satellite imagery to be a part of. So that's great. What can we expect to see from ICEYE over the next few months? What all are, can you share anything that you're working on that we'll see in the future?
Sure. I'm actually very excited to share with you as much as possible. You definitely should. To begin with, you should expect more satellites, right? So as we started this discussion, this year we are just rolling them out of the office every month, right? So there's more satellites coming. Now, I guess one of the very exciting parts of ICEYE satellites, and you might have even seen this, and we observe it obviously internally, which is both raises, it's something that we are very happy about, but sometimes the team can be very anxious about as well, is that the satellites are reprogrammable. And now the instrument, ICEYE's instrument, this is actually a unique capability for us. Our synthetic aperture radar is based on something called an active phased array. Okay. So there are two major technology trends that you could utilize. You either would use a reflector or a reflector array or an active phased array. And the difference is it may, in the naming convention is not as large, but from the physics perspective, a reflector is fixed. So whatever you choose it to be, that's what it is, right? Mm-hmm. And you cannot change it once on orbit. Now, an active phased array is fully reprogrammable. And it's not only reprogrammable year to year or day to day, it's reprogrammable millisecond to millisecond, which means that the way it performs can be continuously changed. And so one of the most recent things that we've developed and we have deployed on all of the satellites is something called scancer mode. So we image a significantly larger or wider area than otherwise possible with the same aperture. So this particular mode covers up to 100 kilometers simultaneously, right? So from the use case perspective, which we just discussed, which is deforestation, the difference between capturing 100 kilometers at the same time and, for instance, 5 or 10 kilometers, it's 10 or 20x, right? So it's a huge amount of additional data that you're getting. And now our very most recent announcement, it's a combination of an active phased array and an extremely precise orbit determination and maneuvering, and it's called the daily coherent ground track repeat. Yeah. We actually had to come up with a name for that because it didn't exist before. Coherent ground track repeats exist, but they have never really been daily. So the next satellite after ours can do it every 8 days. And so the difference is such that either you can observe changes with 8-day intervals, or you can observe changes with 1-day intervals. Mm-hmm. And so that order of magnitude jump, it's transformational from the perspective of what you can see, right? So we've started seeing patterns of life that have really been hidden from us in the past. Mm-hmm. We've published some videos on glacier movement. We've published videos on volcano erupting and how that eruption really evolves day to day. We've published videos on how harbors work and how they really change on daily basis. And your ability to see this with a coherent change detection capability means that you really see changes that are smaller than your resolution cell. So yet another order of magnitude improvement. So right now the whole team is focused on capturing those coherent stacks, daily coherent stacks, and trying to uncover all the different things that really have been hidden from us. And we actually have a whole backlog of material that we are going to share with the community because we think it's truly exciting what this can do. I can say that the research on our side doesn't stop there. As you've noticed, ICEYE has really been driven by making impossible possible since the very day number one. That's why we decided to go after SAR, and still today that engineering spirit persists within the company. So there's a whole set of new modes that really have never been seen before that we're about to deploy later this year. So I will just leave with that, but it's very exciting what's coming up.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that overview and that preview. So we always like to end the TMCs with a more personal question. So what's something that you have been watching or reading or listening to that you would want to recommend to the Via Satellite community?
I see. Let me think. Maybe I will strike one with a bit more of an entertainment angle and one with somewhat more of a learning and development angle. Okay. So recently, my favorite podcast is Choiceology with Katie Milkman. Okay. About the different biases that we have in our decision making. Huh. And that's an excellent supplement to the Think Fast, Think Slow book or Noise book. Very, very interesting, recent kind of behavioral economics type of research on how we make decisions. And On the more entertaining side, something that I've really gotten hooked into recently, and it's very hardcore engineering, but it's also combined with a lot of emotion, is the F1 and Drive to Survive, especially. Looking at those cars and the capabilities that they have and how the teams work on them week by week in order to change even the smallest detail and to get a little bit more performance on the track. It really reminds me of what happens in the company. But
Okay.
When I watch it, it's good because I don't have to put effort in making sure it happens.
Yeah, that's fun. I really like podcasts, and I haven't heard of that Choiceology, but that sounds really interesting. So thank you for sharing. So that is all for today. Thank you all for watching, and thanks so much, Rafal, for coming on the Thursday morning conversation. And we're excited to, keep hearing more from ICEYE.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for having me.